What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Precedent Minds of the Mavericks. My name is Amina, and today we are talking with Safwan JAVED. This is part one. Safwan is the co-founder and drummer of the Canadian group Widemouth Mason. He is also a partner at an entertainment law firm based in Toronto called Taylor Obala Murray Leyland. And I used to work with Safwan, so I do personally know him, and he's such an exceptional talent with a lot of awareness. He's super brilliant. He's always fun to talk to. That's why I'm super excited for this conversation, because he talks to us this week all about his come up into the music world, his transition into becoming an established lawyer, and all of the tribulations that led up to where he is. So without further ado, let's get into it. I like to start every conversation with, how do you define success for yourself?
Oh, wow, that's an incredible conversation starter. Okay, how do I define success? Yes, for myself or generally?
For yourself. And maybe it goes a bit deeper, because obviously you define success for the band, and now as a lawyer.
Okay, so I think conceptually I define it as finding consistent fulfillment, contentedness, maybe even happiness in your daily pursuits. I think that's a pretty lofty concept.
Yeah.
And maybe not an easily grasped one either, in terms of your being conscious of that on a regular basis. I think maybe that's more of like an overview, even retrospectively, where you look back at a period or your life and think, okay, well, was I more happy than I was not? I mean, what's the metric? How do you measure it? I guess that's up to each person. I don't even know that I have a metric. I think you just kind of look inward and see what you come out with. I think, you on a day-to-day basis, we get so caught up in our egos.
Yeah.
And I think those are such weird, ambiguous things that it's a constant wrestling match. And so, I've had many moments in my life that I can recall, and probably many more that I don't happen to recall, where, by any measure, if I were to look at someone else trying to do whatever it was that I was doing, I should feel like I'm successful. And yet you always want more, because you can also see the people that have done more than what you've done. And so, this is analogous to like the social media paradigm we live in, where you see the best of everyone's lives and you think, wow, where's my life at? But the truth of the matter is, everyone feels insecure. Everyone feels like someone else is doing something better than they're doing it, that they haven't achieved stuff. And then I think you also have moments where you do feel good about what you've accomplished. And so I suppose it's a balancing act. I suppose it's a finding the place that, again, what's your metric overall? Are you better off? Are you more often than not, are you feeling good about what you've done, what you are doing? And if so, then I think you've probably come out ahead, because I've seen many people who meet the definitions of success that probably resonate broadly in society, who aren't satisfied with what they've done, who don't feel like, yes, I've achieved this. And I guess, again, it's that balance is critical, right? Because that's what motivates us to go and do things oftentimes. So you want to not feel like you haven't done anything too much, but you also want to feel it a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. That was a good answer. I like that.
It was a long answer. Sorry, I didn't
know. No, what?
success.
No.
Bam. I thought your first question was going to be like, well, how do you take your coffee in the morning, or what's your morning routine or something?
I like to ask that because, like you're saying, like, I think that, like, for example, like a lot of artists are like, yeah, like I want to be on billboards, and that's a great goal, but it's not realistic for everybody, right? Like not every artist is going to get on billboard, but that doesn't mean you're not successful. It's just it's how you define it for yourself, right? And now getting into music, I want to know, was music always it for you? Like, did you know you were going to get into music?
No, it was really weird. Like I started playing drums at a very young age. I think I was 9 maybe when I first played a drum, maybe even younger. I think maybe 7 when I
Wow.
first got like a toy drum kit, and then graduated to the real thing when I was 8 or 9, started taking lessons.
Wow.
So I was into it. I was really into it.
Yeah.
But then, like, I had phases where I would not be into it, where something else was more important, like maybe basketball or who knows, whatever.
Yeah.
Um, but it was, in retrospect, it like my dad pointed this out to me at one point in life, and he was never super supportive of me playing music as like a career.
Yeah.
He always thought it was a weird choice, and was quite critical of it at first. He came around eventually, but at one point he did say to me, he's like, the only constant I've seen you go through phases of like where now you're into martial arts, or now you're into whatever sports, or now you're into something else. Like the only constant I've seen in your life, like from early age, is drums. And you had time periods where you'd play them less, but you always had they were always there, and you always at least went down and played a little bit. And then you have
Yeah.
periods where you played a lot. So I think maybe I hadn't thought it through, but because it was the old standby and the thing that was always there for me and the thing that felt pretty natural, certainly more than it didn't, um, I think at some point it became a thing where it was just part of my being, right? Part of my sense of self, part of my identity.
Yeah.
And certainly when the band became a thing at that point, because of the age I was and point in life I was at, um, I wholly identified as this. I'm a musician, and so if you had asked me when I was 22 or 23, you know, did you always want to be a musician? Did you think you were? I would have said, oh yeah, this is what I have
Wow.
been my whole life. But I think
Yeah.
now looking back, I realize that no, I kind of stumbled into it. I had the people that I made music with, the guy I still make music with, is one of my closest friends since like grade 4 is when we first started
Wow.
making music together. We were in school together in grade school and high school. um, he was like, he's a musician from the beginning and the end.
Yeah.
Like that's what he will do his whole life, and that was very obvious pretty early on. And I think because of the because of our friendship, and because we mesh well in terms of creating together and collaborating, um, I just kind of, like I said, fell into it. It almost felt like at the beginning, anyway, I was just along for the ride. But then I fell in love with everything that it brings. Right?
Yeah.
It's 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 so powerful internally. um I don't think I was aware of it. I didn't know that somehow making being creative and making music is there's a therapeutic element to it.
Yeah.
There's a kind of, maybe even a spiritual
Oh,
element
absolutely.
to it. And then there's a social element to it, right? The connection with other people and the shared experience through creative expression is a unique experience in this world. And to be on that side of it, like, uh, my one of my biggest regrets is I didn't appreciate it enough at the time. I think now
Oh,
I look back, and because I still get to go out and do shows and make records, I still get pieces of it. But back in the day, that's all I did. I'd be on the road
yeah.
200 days in a year,
That's crazy.
and I think I didn't. And part of it is you're just so caught up in the logistical bog of it, right? You're just like,
Yeah.
it's constantly go go go. There's a routine that comes with it. There's a lot of travel, there's a lot of setup, tear down, all that stuff,
Absolutely.
that you perhaps lose sight of the big picture because you're so caught up in the minutia. But but yeah, now I'm able to, fortunately, I guess, look back and think, well, man, how fortunate am I,
Yeah. What a ride.
that I got to experience that. Like, it's crazy that I got to experience
Absolutely.
that.
I want to go back to what you were saying about your dad and like your family in general, because you're Pakistani. And I think I'll end up asking this a lot throughout the podcast because culturally, being in bands that like sounds weird. Like, what the hell are you going to do with that? Like, bro, what? and,
Yeah.
and it's, I think a lot of us culturally end up get shamed into like stopping our dreams because it's like, yeah, well, you're supposed to have this prestigious role or whatever. Like, how did you find the courage to be like, yo, I'm actually good at this and I want to do this? Like, essentially, I guess it sounds like rebelling against what your parents wanted for you.
Yeah, I think it was that was really tough. I don't even know if it was as like I did it in a safe way, I guess.
Oh,
I went to university. I started getting, my undergraduate degree, and during the summers, I'd go and go on the road, and we were a cover band to start. Right, we'd go play in
oh,
like
cool.
small towns in BC and Alberta and Saskatchewan, and we'd play cover songs like 3 sets a night and do like, sometimes a whole week at a place, sometimes like a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, but you'd stay wherever you were playing, and you play like, top 40 music for whatever the I guess I use the term masses loosely here, but whatever the masses wanted.
Yeah.
And and so I would do that in the summers when I would have break from school and then go back to school. um, but then it started growing and turning into something more, and I could kind of, there were obvious signs that that was happening.
Yeah.
So I think at some point I must have just realized that, oh, this is more than like my summer job potentially.
Yeah.
And then labels started showing interest. And so when that started happening, I realized that this was an opportunity that wasn't just me playing, you know, schlock songs in a small town bar, that potentially there's more to this. And so that was where I had to then kind of quote unquote rebel. But
Yeah.
I presented it to my parents in a way where I think, and I give them credit, right? They're pretty
Absolutely.
progressive, certainly on the political side of things. They're super progressive, um, and socially, considering their background, like they were Pakistani, but they weren't on the like extreme end of
Cool. Okay.
some of the stereotypes we think of
Yeah.
Pakistani or South Asian or West
Yeah.
Indian parents, right? It's
Yeah.
like they had some of those elements, but they weren't like super intense about it. But still, they were definitely there, and it was a challenge. So my kind of presentation to them was, listen, I think we're going to get offered this deal to sign with a record label. I don't even know if they knew what a record label was.
Wow.
And I'm like, if I know that I should be studying, and I will keep studying, but here's my deal. I just want to try this. Give me like a year or two,
Wow.
and let me see what happens. I'm going to get my undergraduate degree, because this was the thing, right? Like that degree wasn't enough. I was still
Yeah.
going to get my undergraduate degree, but that wasn't enough. Like that wasn't enough for them to be like, okay, you did what you did, now go off into the world, son. Like it was in my family, it was like, no, your undergraduate degree is the first of at least a couple of degrees,
Yeah.
but you should be thinking about at least, you should certainly be considering 3 degrees. And like well into my musical career, my dad would still be saying to me, so have you thought about going back? And like at the
Oh
peak of
my
my
God.
musical success, he was still like on it. Anyway, I kind of struck a quote unquote deal with them of like, hey, I'm going to do this for, just let me try this for a year or two, okay?
Yeah.
And I'll come back and I will continue my education. And it took a bit, but they came around, and I don't know that they were super happy about it, but again, like I said, they were kind of on the progressive side of things. So they
Okay.
were like, yeah, okay, you can try this. Um, we don't love it, but try it.
Yeah.
And then stuff started happening, and it quickly snowballed, and then it changed. Then it was, at least with my mom, she stopped asking me to go back to school.
Wow. That's amazing. I love that. And I
Mhm.
want to go, you said you met, it's Sean, right? You met in grade
Sean,
4.
yeah, that's
That's
right.
crazy. That's amazing.
I know, it's nuts.
And then what, it was you, Sean, and Earl who were originally in the band.
That's right.
And how old were you when you met Earl?
That would have been in, I guess, the summer of my first year of university. So
Okay,
I would have been
cool.
like 18, 19, something like that. He knew
Wow.
Sean, him and Sean played together in other iterations or other bands. And then that summer after high school, I guess after first year, no, it was after high school actually. Yeah. So I was 18. Um, Sean said, hey, I know this guy who plays bass. Do you want to jam sometime? Like, yeah, sure. So they came to my parents' basement, and that became
Oh,
this. Yeah.
that's crazy. And then how old were you guys when you guys started Why Mouth Mason? You're like, yo, this is who we
So
are.
yeah, I mean, that may have been the start of it.
Okay.
It wasn't that, it wasn't called that, and it certainly, we had no idea what it was going to be. At that point, it was just three or four. There was actually a fourth guy there too, named Neil Hendry, that we just kind of played together because we all knew and liked each other
Cool.
to varying degrees. Um, but then when we started doing the summer stuff where we were a cover band, we'd take on these different names and iterations, and eventually it whittled down to well, pretty quickly actually, it was the three of us.
Yeah.
Sometimes we'd have a fourth other person come along to play keyboards and stuff like that, but those were like momentary blips. And then probably by the time we were 20, I'm gonna say 2021 maybe, um, it started, like the early seeds of what the band would become were planted. We started getting really into blues music,
Yeah.
and started playing a lot of it, and we'd start putting blues songs into the cover bar sets. And eventually we, instead of playing kind of top 40 cover bars, we started playing blues bars. And in blues rooms, sure, we're still doing three sets, and we're still covering a lot of songs by blues musicians, but we started being able to sneak in every once in a while our own songs.
Oh, nice.
And that's where I think it was like, oh, this is its own thing. This
Yeah.
isn't, we're not just a cover band. There's more to this.
Yeah. And did you find, sorry, so where did you go to school? Was it in BC?
No, I grew up in Saskatoon. That's where all of us
Yes.
did. And so I went to my
Oh,
undergraduate degree was at University of Saskatchewan.
okay. So then in Saskatchewan, because obviously, like, I'm assuming back then there wasn't a huge music scene, or like there wasn't a lot coming out of there, right? Because obviously we think Toronto, maybe
Yeah.
Vancouver, Montreal, I think has a bigger scene
Yeah.
now. But like, yeah, like Saskatchewan's not somewhere you think about when you think about music from Canada, essentially.
No, it's interesting. It's like all of those cities like Toronto, or sorry, Saskatoon, Regina, Edmonton, Calgary, Winnipeg, definitely. They all had their own like kind of internal music scenes,
For
right? So
sure.
you'd have, because there'd be places,
Like
there'd
a
be venues.
subculture.
Yeah, it's like its own little insulated universe kind of, or little solar system. So um, there are tons of musicians in Saskatoon, and like some pretty good ones. Um, but yeah, to be able to break nationally or internationally, that was a rare occurrence. Like that was
Yeah.
usually, there was one every like 10 to 20 years maybe, right? So
Yeah.
like Joni Mitchell was from Saskatoon. Um, you know,
Tesher's from Saskatchewan, actually.
huh?
Tesher, he broke
Yeah,
last year.
there you go.
Yeah.
Um, the Northern Pikes were from Saskatchewan. We were from Saskatchewan. The Sheepdogs were from Saskatchewan. Like, so
Oh,
every like 10 to 20 years, maybe
yeah.
there's something like rises up and is able to create this like sustained, career out of it.
Yeah. Okay,
So
so then
yeah, but there weren't. You're right. It wasn't like, and to some degree that makes you think, oh well, we're just from Saskatoon. Um, but I think once we got out on the road a little bit and started seeing kind of, and again, I think it was a big confidence boost, right? I was I was quite skeptical when we started getting label
wow.
interest. Um, but I think if you peeled away those layers, I'd also have to admit that I was also, it fills you with confidence, right? You feel like, oh, this is
Absolutely.
like on a bigger level that sees something in us. And so it turns into a good feedback loop where like that boosts your confidence even more.
Yeah. And then, okay, so you guys released your first album. It's Nazarene, right? I'm saying that right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then, yeah, Warner Music comes up. They're like, yo, we fuck with y'all. Like,
Yeah.
we want to like sign you guys, right? And it seems like it happened from what I've read. Like, it seems like it happened in quick succession. Were you
Mhm.
prepared for that at all?
I would say no, and it was like, it was interesting because it was like the I think at least three of the major labels came knocking at the door, and
Whoa.
so like it was a different infrastructure back then, right? For in terms of how the industry worked here, like there used to be a lot more in terms of regional label presence. So like there were field offices for all the labels, right? Warner had a field office in Edmonton and in Calgary and in Saskatoon or Regina, and so did all the others. And so part of what was great about that was those people in the field offices would have an ear to the ground. They'd have like
Yeah.
a direct link to those little solar systems we were talking about earlier, right?
Yeah.
That where whatever the music scene was in Saskatoon or in Regina or in Edmonton, the local field office people would probably get a sense, at least if it bubbled up to a certain level, they'd start hearing about it.
Yeah.
And so so yeah, like they all kind of came knocking, and we had a manager in place. He wasn't super experienced, but he was the gatekeeper, and it worked for us. So they came, and they sent, first they would send, obviously the field office people would show up at shows, and then when it got serious, they started sending like the executives from Toronto to
Whoa.
come out to the shows, and then they're serious, right? And then
Yeah.
um, yeah, I don't think we were prepared for it, but pretty quickly we knew kind of, okay, here's what's going on. This is a bit of a like, they're gonna see who they're gonna pitch to us basically, right? And say
Yeah.
like, who you want to sign with. Um, and so it ended up being Warner, because the person that came out to see us, his name is Dave Tollington, and he's just a wonderful human being and also incredibly knowledgeable about music. um, and he just kind of came out, and he got it right. Like he said the right things, and it wasn't from a place of saying the right things to say the right things. Like he genuinely
Genuine.
felt that, and
Yeah.
knew that like he and we were into the same stuff. So he referenced like a lot of Motown stuff, right? He
Wow.
specifically referenced James Jamerson. He specifically referenced a lot of reggae stuff. Like he, he talked about not just Bob Marley, but Peter Tosh, and he also talked about people that I hadn't even heard of. So it was
Yeah.
like, oh, this guy knows, not only knows his stuff, but knows that that's the stuff that we're into.
Yeah.
Whereas I think some of the others are more like, hey, you guys could be the next,
Yeah.
fill in the next Our Lady piece or whatever the thing was. And we're like,
Yeah.
well, that's cool, but
But
we're kind of us,
yeah.
and we really like um, Bob Marley and James
Yeah.
Jamerson.
Okay, so in retrospect though, like now as a lawyer, do you look back at like some of the choices you made back then, like contract wise, and you're like, oh fuck, what was I thinking?
Oh yeah, like most of them. Most of them is like, oh my god, it's crazy. I mean, I kind of like in law school, I never went to law school to practice law, and I know that sounds like I'm just kind of being flippant about it, but honestly, at that point I still thought I was just going to keep making music full time my whole life, and that's it. But law school was a good break. Like I was burnt out, and I also do, and like pretty consistently in life, I enjoy opportunities to learn. I was like, law school seems like a pretty good
Yeah.
opportunity to learn. And I also thought it would give me an opportunity to learn not just about other areas of law, but specifically those areas of the law that it had affected my career in music. And so when I kind of like now, having been able to kind of process all that I have as a music lawyer and look back at those contracts, I'm like, oh man, what were we doing? Like, why did we let this term stay in there? That's crazy.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's jokes.
yeah,
Did you,
like
did
what
you
the
guys
heck?
sign blindly or like did you have a lawyer at the time?
No, we had a lawyer.
I don't know. I don't know. Some people sign blindly, so
No, totally. And back in those days, people did for sure.
yeah,
Now, now
100%.
the majors won't let you do it, right? You have to have a lawyer.
Yeah. Oh wow.
Um,
Okay, that's very nice to know.
well,
Um,
yeah, because it undermines the validity of the contract if you have someone who has no clue what they're signing.
oh,
A
interesting.
major label deal, then they're probably in it for a lot of what their work's going to be and what their career is going to be.
Yeah.
So, but
So
yeah, it was, and I don't blame the lawyer. Like I can't really remember, to be honest. The lawyer probably told us all the stuff, and again told our manager, who, um, maybe we didn't fully understand it or care. We were young. We were like,
yeah,
who cares?
yeah, you're signed to a label, right?
Just
So
put the music up.
you get signed now. Was there any like struggle over creative ideas where they like, yeah, let's actually make your sound more like Our Lady of Peace or something like that, or like XYZ band?
No, and in large part, that was because of that, who I referenced earlier, Dave Tollington, and then there was another, the
Yeah.
head of the A&R at that point for our first album anyway, was a gentleman named Kim Cook, who is also a wonderful human being
Cool.
and also extremely knowledgeable about music. And they were kind of from that school of thought of where like they weren't signing us to A&R us, if I can use that as a verb. What I mean by that is they weren't really there to coach us musically. I think they were there to support whatever our musical vision was, and they had a good sense of what that musical vision was based on what we had already done.
Yeah.
So, um, so yeah, there wasn't a lot of conflict. It started happening later, but that was when by the time both of them had moved on. So,
Yeah.
um, at that point there would be like I remember the first round of where we were submitting demos. I think it was for maybe it was for our fourth album. I can't remember, but it was later on. And they sent us notes back, and it was just like, this is crazy. Like, we can take, we're down for constructive criticism. It would happen all the
Yeah.
time, especially with really good producers. That's part of the gig, right? We want
Mhm.
that. um I mean, I struggled with it the first time it happened. I think we all did. But then you learn and you understand that, oh, wait a second, this is actually to improve
Yeah.
what we're
Wow.
putting out there, right? It's like you're serving the songs, you're serving the album, and that's beyond your own ego of like, well, I like this part. Well, it doesn't matter. It's like
Yeah.
what resonates more broadly, what's better for this song. Anyway, when we started getting notes back on that fourth album, the demos for it, it was like the notes were so, like, in some cases, honestly, and I don't mean to disparage anyone, but I'm not naming any names, so I don't think I will. But the notes were honestly just ridiculous. They were like,
Oh shit.
they were like nonsensical notes, like too much hi-hat ride. Like, what is a
The
hi-hat
hell?
ride? I don't even know what that is. Um, so what are you trying to say here? Or like,
Yeah.
I think one of the notes was no need to be funky on one of the
The
songs. And
hell?
it's like, I mean, funk is a pretty deep-seated and important critical cog in the overall picture of Western music. And
Yeah.
certainly for us, if you know who we are as a band, it's like one of the, maybe the four pillars of our band, right? So I don't know what that means. Um, anyway, point being, it's like, we're happy to take critical or constructive
Absolutely.
criticism, but it needs to be like somewhat founded in an educated perspective on
Absolutely.
that, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Like
that
you'll
makes sense.
respect a respected opinion.
I'll respect
Like,
someone who says something to me that makes sense.
yeah, fair, fair. That's hilarious.
Yeah.
I want to get into touring because you touched on it a bit, and you were like, "Yeah, you guys would be out 200 days of the year," and that's
Yeah.
friggin' wild. And I think while most people can understand, like we look at a tour bus and we're like, "Bruh, I would not like to live like this." It's still very glamorized. Like I
Yeah.
think it's very, very glamorized. Was touring everything you ever wanted?
It was everything I ever wanted and everything I never wanted. It
Fair.
was it's
Yeah.
it is cool. It's like, especially the first few times, we're like, whoa, we're in a tour bus, because we had toured in a minivan with a trailer, right? Like that for
Oh
us, when we
shoot.
got the trailer, it was a big step up. And then when we stepped up from a minivan to a 12 passenger, 15 passengers, like, oh man, this is it.
That's
But
wild.
then when we went to a bus, it was like, okay, this is something else. And
Yeah.
it's great, right? It's fantastic. But, like with everything, once the shine kind of wears off, you're like, oh yeah, we're living on basically a submarine with
Yeah.
six other dudes for 200 days of the
Oh my
year.
god.
It's,
Oh my god.
you
Whoa.
can, if you need to go to the bathroom, you can only do number one. And yeah, there's a lot of stuff you got to navigate. It's
Yeah. There's no bidets on the tour bus.
ain't no bidets, man.
And like talk about being homesick because like I was watching an interview with you and you were like, yeah, like if I could fly home for 2 days, I absolutely would.
Yeah, and I would add, towards like deeper into our careers, I did start doing that from time to time.
Yeah.
You
Because
miss you miss what your grounding force is, right? Like your people, your close friends, and you have
your own
relationships.
bed.
Yeah, and some space. And like, I'm an only child, right? So I think that was part of it. I grew up with like, I
Yeah.
need a bit of
I
space.
forgot
And
about that.
like,
That's so
I
funny.
need to have like some air, man. And you don't, in a in a tour bus, you definitely do not. And it's 24/7, right? It's not like,
Yeah.
oh, I just work with these people and I love them. It's not like that. But
No, for sure. But
even in
sometimes you need your alone time. And it's
yeah,
like,
even in
how
the
do you
happiest marriages, or even like, I'm a dad now, so even with my kids, it's like, hey, I'm just gonna go sit in the bathroom for an hour and
yeah,
just like, I'll see you
be
in a
alone.
bit. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's like space is important and like we all need that as human beings. Like I think
totally. And
it's
you need both,
important.
right? Again, it's the balance of, you need social, you need that social interaction, but you also need that alone time.
Absolutely, yeah. And like obviously going off the tour bus thing, like the lifestyle can be a burden, right? Because it's like you've mentioned, like it's obviously like a lot of partying, it's late nights, it's obviously catching up with the body.
Mm.
Um, like were you able to find moments to relax aside from going home? Like how do you even do that in
Yeah,
space?
you
And
figure
when
it
you're
out.
young and you like you have other families like you've just like spoken about.
Yeah, you figure it out. it's sink or swim, so you quickly figure out how to do it, whether that's, you know, some dudes will just stay in their own bunk for periods of time listening to music or
Yeah.
watching a movie or whatever. Sometimes because most bus configurations have two lounges, one at the front, one at the back.
Yeah.
And so, maybe there's some kind of like tacit or explicit agreement that this lounge is for
Oh,
just
okay.
chilling and this lounge is for when you
Yeah.
want to bring guests on. um, and then whenever you're at whenever you get to your destination, it's some people will go out and have a meal on their own, or go sit in a park or do something, right? Go to the hotel room.
Yeah.
um, yeah, you find ways to make it happen. And
Absolutely.
the good part for us is we're a three-piece band, so it wasn't too
Oh
bad.
yeah.
Like maybe three of us and then maybe three crew guys.
Okay.
Whereas, if we were like a six-piece band or something like that, then it's like even more intense. Um, and you also figure out and learn to respect each other's needs too.
For
So
sure.
that if there's a guy in the back lounge who this is his time where he wants to like play his video game or read his book or
Yeah.
whatever, it's cool. I don't need to
Absolutely.
go and like go and take over that space or interrupt his piece there.
Yeah. And like obviously it catches up, lack of sleep, drinking.
Hmm.
It has to like fuck with you. I did it for like a weekend and I was like, holy shit, I can't live like this. I can't be drinking and not sleeping. Like this is not a life. Um, you guys never broke up, but you opted to explore different ventures.
Yeah.
What was it for you that you're like, yo, I can't be doing this full time anymore?
Um, the partying never really, I mean, so like full disclosure, I wasn't that much of a partier. Like
Okay.
I don't really drink.
Yeah.
And so that wasn't really ever a thing for me. It was for other people. Um, some in the band, some crew, whatever,
Yeah.
again, you're out there and it's like, of course that's going to happen. And it's fine. It's finding that, again, it's finding the ability to mesh with that. If not everyone's into that, then how do you like ensure,
Yeah.
bus is going to be leaving at another time. I'm going to go to sleep. We got to be up at 7 a.m. for some interview, but there's a party going on. So
Yeah.
how do those worlds kind of all mesh together? And, sometimes it doesn't mesh. There'd be blow ups and
For sure.
there, there'd be incidents, let's say.
Yeah.
Um, but that's all part of the deal. I think when we got to where we were like, okay, let's kind of each do our thing. I'll take some responsibility in that. I think like I said earlier, I was feeling burnout. So I was like,
Okay.
I'm gonna take a break. I'm gonna go to school again and recharge my brain and my body in a way.
Yeah.
Um, and I'll still be able to do gigs, and when I can't, we can find someone to replace me. I don't feel like I'm an integral, like if I'm not there, it doesn't mean it's not the band, right?
Yeah.
Whereas if Sean's not singing, it's pretty tough, although
Yeah.
maybe, who knows. um but yeah, so that's where I think everyone was like, yeah, let's explore other stuff. We don't need to be so tied into just this as our sole sense of everything.
Yeah.
Identity, income, lifestyle, all that stuff
Yeah.
doesn't need to be just this.
Sorry, how old were you at this point? Or like in and around?
30,
Okay.
32, maybe.
So how long have you guys been
32.
like how so yeah, so like it had
That was
been
a
10
decade. That was
years.
like about a decade.
Okay, cool. I feel like that was like a good amount of time to experience all of that because I feel like you flushed out a lot in that time, right? Um,
Yeah, and it's like, honestly, like I said, there's some burnout. Some of it comes with, like, it's tough to maintain whatever kind of your peak is. That's why a peak is a peak, because
yeah,
there's a down part to it too.
absolutely.
Um, and so, after a few albums of like, oh, this one didn't do as well as the last one. Oh, this one
Oh
didn't
yeah,
do as well as the one that didn't do as well as the one before it. It's like that starts to wear on you too, right? Emotionally, it's a
yeah.
drag. I took it especially harsh. Like I
Oh,
would
interesting.
I would struggle with that stuff.
Yeah. And it's interesting because like when you put out those like you're saying like yeah, if like the last album, sorry, the former album didn't do as good as the last
Yeah.
album, are you like you're obviously confident putting it out and
Hmm.
then you don't get that feedback or the reception that you thought you were going to get, how do you not like how do you not take it personally? Or maybe now it's that you're not taking it personally, you're like, yo, I still actually really love that album, like I love that
Yeah.
body of work, but like maybe it was just too progressive, or like
I don't know. I
wasn't
still
the right
wrestle.
time.
Yeah, to be honest with you, like I still wrestle with it. I'll go back and listen to albums that didn't do as well, and I'm like, and try to be critical. I don't know if I can be really objective about it, but
Yeah,
and try to be critical. And I can, yeah, I can poke holes, but I can also poke holes in the ones that did really well.
yeah,
And so, and so, I maybe it's just me justifying it. I don't know. Um, but I typically land in a place of thinking, I don't know how much of the music of success in the music business is based on quality, is based on like,
got
is
you.
this a good song or not? Is this a good recording of a good song? I think that that's an element. Those are elements for sure. But I also think there's some elements of like luck. There's
Yeah,
some
yeah,
elements of like, um, you know, this was the right buttons were kind of pressed when this was
yeah,
getting promoted, and it
yeah.
just
Because
happened to,
sometimes it is just marketing, right? Like,
right? It is, and it's like the right type of marketing for the right type
yeah,
of artist to the right audience. Like all those
100%,
things, when they line up, can do magical stuff. Because sometimes you listen to stuff and you're like, this isn't that good of a track, and yet it's blowing up,
100%.
right? And so it's like, okay, well, something else is up. So yeah, I took it personally for sure, and to some extent, I still do. Like, I still will listen to some of those albums and be like, this didn't get a fair shake, man. That's kind of bullshit.
That is very annoying. That
Yeah.
is frustrating. I want to, I guess, jump ahead to a bit of where you are now. So, like, you end up going to law school in around 30. Were you ever like, holy shit, like, I'm starting late? I feel like people are always like,
Yeah.
I'm turning 30 in December, and it's like, shit, like, have I passed this prime? Like, is it too late to reinvent who I want to be and like start fresh? How did
Mm.
you feel going into law school?
Yeah, I think I was 31 or 30. I think it was 32 when I started, and I was like, the way more people were younger in law school than they
Yeah,
were older than me. There were a few that were older, like mature students. Um, but I think probably average age of the first year law school student at that point was like 26, 27 maybe. So
yeah.
I wasn't that much older, but it felt
Okay.
like I was a lot older.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And certainly it felt like I had a lot more kind of like lived experience, at least a unique lived experience. So
Yeah,
in a way
absolutely.
that helped me quite a bit.
Did
Um,
it give you like any confidence that like obviously like I've lived a completely different lifestyle from a lot of people.
it did in a way, and in a way it also undercut some of my confidence. So
Oh,
the way that it helped was, and it still to this day it helps me in life. It's like I look back on it, and I'm so thankful that I got to experience what I got to experience, because like to this day, me being in the band helps me with things, right? If
yeah.
someone happens to know who the band was, and that would happen in law school too, where like there were professors that knew who the band was and would like
Wow.
want to talk to me about it, and other people, other students, and like it's cool, right? Like I would like that. It was always like
Yeah.
respectful and mellow, and it doesn't mean you necessarily like the music, but it was just kind of a confidence boost for me. But where it would undercut was me thinking, well, these people are all like fresh out of doing their undergrads or something not dissimilar to
Yeah.
studying at school. So like they know how to do this. I haven't done this in over a decade. Like I don't know if I
Oh
remember
yeah.
how to study. How do you study? And so, and it was like kind of it crystallized, or it was epitomized in looking around and being like, when I went to undergrad, nobody had laptops, right? That wasn't a
Yeah.
thing. So you just took notes by writing.
Yeah.
Um, and I was there, and now it's like, wait, almost everyone was on a laptop, and I was too, but I wasn't used to doing that. Like I didn't know, I hadn't had any experience of like taking notes while someone's lecturing on a laptop. It was
Yeah.
like, so that kind of, I was like, oh man, do I even know what I'm supposed to be writing down? It's like, of
Yeah.
course you do. It's the
Of
same thing
course.
as writing with your hand, except you're
Yeah.
probably faster.
Yeah.
Um,
It's like relearning a bicycle, right? Like,
but yeah, it's just like different elements being put in new contexts that you aren't used to. That context that you were used to had some other elements in it before.
yeah.
So anyway, but pretty quickly, because again, I wasn't there to party, and a lot of the
Yeah.
it's not that they were there to party, but like they still would party,
Yeah.
um, and socialize a lot. I was kind of pretty serious about, again, this is me, I'm here to learn, so I'm going to put
Absolutely.
my energy into that.
Yeah.
And so, pretty quickly you kind of learn the ropes, and that ended up being fine.
Did you find that people are ever judge you like, oh my God, this rock star probably has like, he's just bored and wants to go to law school? Like they were just like, what is he trying to do here?
I don't know if they did, they never told me that.
Oh my
Law school is weird, right? Because it's such a weird mix of people. It doesn't. It's unique in that, like, if you go to med school, everyone there has studied science,
yeah.
right? Everyone there has
Yes.
studied anatomy. Everyone there has studied biochemistry. Everyone there has studied biology. You have
Yeah.
to. Um, but in law school, you'll have people that, like, oh, this person comes from a patents background, and this person comes from a chemistry background, and this
Yeah.
person comes from a commerce background, and this person comes from a philosophy background.
Sure.
And it's like, it's a very interesting mix of people, and it's really varied and quite diverse in that respect. Um, so yeah, there was a guy in my first year law school class he used to play for the BC Lions, like he played professional football, right? So like, it
Yeah.
was really, it was a varied group. So I don't know that maybe someone was like, oh, look at this guy, he thinks he's something because he's a drummer in a rock band.
Well,
Um, but yeah, they didn't tell me that. So
that's
there
really
was one guy that used to look at me funny. Maybe that's what was going on.
maybe. Yeah.
Yeah.
And even like now, like,
Giving me the side eye.
like you're obviously, well, Safwan is now an established partner of a law firm. Um, and that's very exciting. Do you feel like people are like resistant, or like they're just like, yo, I don't know if I want to deal with him? And also, I want to get into you're a person of color. Obviously, your name is Safwan Javed. We've had this conversation before where you're like, yo, yeah, I'll just go by Saf to make it easier for people. My name is
Yeah.
Amina. It's not, it, people are not receptive sometimes. How do you deal with it? Like when you're building up a clientele and stuff, like how do you deal with all of that?
And maybe it's a bit like, I don't know, maybe I should be paying more attention to that stuff. I certainly am, from kind of like a systemic level. I have some very strong views on things like systemic racism
Yeah,
and inequities in our society. Um, but I think when it comes down to like my day to day, it's not even a thought, because I think, A, I'm just really busy,
yeah,
and B, I think it kind of sorts itself. Like, if someone doesn't
for
want to work
sure.
with me because my name isn't, Joe Smith, um,
Yeah,
well, cool, okay, like that kind of, they weeded themselves out, or they
for
weeded me
sure.
out, and it's probably
Amazing.
better that way. Like,
Yeah,
what would we be doing? I can't, I can't even envision what it would look like if that person who dislikes the notion of me based on race or
yeah,
ethnic background, like, how would we even work together? I don't know.
100%.
Anyway, um, I've been so fortunate. Like, our firm um, does lean heavily on progressive thinking, and wants to
Sure.
be, and works hard to be inclusive and diverse. Um, on all the fronts. So from that respect, I think it kind of speaks for itself, right? Like, the fact that I'm a
Yeah,
partner tells you what you need to know. The fact that there's another
absolutely.
partner there that also doesn't
Yeah,
have, it has is a person of color. It kind of tells you what you need to know, and so
yeah,
that makes it a lot. I feel like maybe I'm kind of like insulated from the outside world, because our firm is good like that.
yeah, for sure. And like obviously law is now your full-time work. You do music on the side still, which is friggin' dope. How do you create
Mhm.
time for yourself? Like how do you create that balance? Because obviously your job is very demanding.
Yeah, it's I don't I think you make a choice, right? If I wanted to go full bore and say, you know what, I really want to put more effort into being more frequent in having our content, creating content and putting it out there,
Yeah,
that would necessarily take away from, like, there's only so much time in a day, that would necessarily take away from either what I'm doing at work or from me being at home with my kids.
yeah,
And so you find, I guess, the comfort zone for you, or whatever ends up being workable and feasible. we put out an album like once every 5 years now, whereas before we were
Yeah.
putting out an album every 1 to 2 years.
Okay.
Even it's 5 is even true. I bet you we put out an album once, if you average it, probably once every like 7 or 8 years now.
Yeah.
So that gives you like, there's a lot of space in 7 or 8 years to kind of like
Same.
churn out whatever else you need to churn out. We gig probably like, maybe 4 or 5, maximum of like 10 dates in a year. And they're all like fly in, do a
Yeah.
show, fly home.
Yeah.
Um, so it's not that disruptive. And again, that's some of that is a conscious choice, in that if
Yeah.
we wanted to like push hard and call our agent and be like, let's get way more gigs, we could try to do that. But then I'm going to see my kids less. I'm going to
Yeah.
probably have more stress on myself to deal with my workload as a
Yeah.
lawyer. So you find what works. It's a balancing act.
Absolutely.
But again, I kudos to the people at my firm who help so much with that, whether it's
Absolutely.
the staff that's there to help me, whether it's the partners themselves or the other lawyers there. It's an environment that nurtures me being able to do that, to
Yeah.
still be a musician and to be like a relatively okay dad.
Yeah. This is a side note question because it just dawned on me. Do you ever look back at your old music and you're like, if you're touring again and you're like, why am I like, I'm not the same person anymore? Because it happened with Outkast. Actually, Andre 3000 was like, I don't really want to tour anymore. I think it was like a couple years back, and they were like touring and stuff, and like you could just see that he wasn't into it. He's like, I wrote these songs when I was 19. I am not 19 anymore. I
Yeah.
don't feel the same way about
Yeah.
that. And like, do you find that with like any of your old stuff?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, I think a little bit. But you also, I think for us, it's a bit, I think it's less likely to be an issue for us because the content of our songs when we were 19, 20, 21, 22, that age, um, it isn't explicitly touching on anything, right? It's like often um, kind of innocuous stories, or sometimes it's just random piecing together of words to try and
Yeah.
create a feeling or a vibe or whatever. um, there's nothing, I don't think anyway, I should qualify that. I can't think of anything off the top of my head where I'm like, ooh, that's like an embarrassing, we landed on the wrong side of that one historically, because we didn't really say anything like that. There's some stuff where I'm like, yeah, we could have done better as
Sure.
songwriters, right? Like you can critique the artistry
Yeah.
of it for sure, but I don't think there's anything there where I'm like, ooh, that didn't age well in terms of the social
Yeah.
landscape we live in now.
For sure. And like, yeah, so yeah, I just was side noting in my head. Back to like being a lawyer, like, do you find there's pressure? Obviously, there's a lot of pressure on the work you do, right? Because there's timelines and these are people's like lives. I always used to say that like people would come into the firm and it was like their dreams were coming true. They just felt that much
Yeah.
closer to it. Like, how do you know when you've finished like good work for somebody? Like you're like, you've looked over a contract, you've written up a contract, you're like, yo, okay, this is solid. Like there's nothing more I can do here. Do you ever get that?
Yeah, it's tough. It depends on like who's the client, what's the situation.
Yeah.
um and so you want to try and have a good sense of of who the person is that you're representing and what they're looking for
Yeah.
in life and in that specific situation. And so and some of it boils down to like, well, what leverage do you actually have to be able to say, well, we don't like this, change it or else we're walking.
Yeah.
Is the other side just going to say, okay, walk? In which case you're like, oh, that didn't really work out the way I'd hoped.
Yeah.
um
It is like
so,
kind of playing poker, right? Where you're like, okay, how much
yeah.
do I bluff and stuff? Like, how much
and you
can
st-
I?
and the longer you do it, the more you kind of figure out how the game works, I guess, a lot like poker.
Yeah.
So and also you start to become familiar with the various other poker players that are there.
Yes.
And so you kind of, again, you learn and figure out, okay, this is a thing we can probably get, this is a thing we probably can't get. Do we still put it in anyway?
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe, or maybe not. what's the time pressure on this? Like what needs to happen? Does this deal need to be done before a release happens, and that release is already scheduled, and this person has invested a lot of time, energy, and effort
Yeah.
into timing it for that? Yeah, you look at all the variables and try to find the best balancing point for all of them, and ultimately, like if I'm looking at most deals that I'm looking at for clients, especially that are artists, is, well, here's the range of kind of what's normal. And again, I get some insights into that because I see a lot of deals. And does this fall in that range, and does it fall probably in the right part of that range based on
Yeah.
who this person is and based on who the other side is? And if so, and then you take it to the client too, right? Be like, hey, do you want to, here's kind of what's going on, here's what should be going on, how do you feel? And you kind of follow their lead on in that respect, right? And if they don't
Absolutely.
have a lead, then you let them know what you think, and give them some informed um, knowledge to be able to make a decision based on.
For sure. Yeah. I want to wrap up there because we've gotten to the part of your journey as to where you are now.
Yes.
And next week, I want to get into the innovation part, like how you've made it where you are, and like gotten all the accolades you have. So thank you, Saf, for part one. Oh my gosh.
Thank you. That was fantastic. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yay.